Hello and welcome to Living a Graceful Life. I'm Denise Medved, your host, and I'm also the creator and founder of the Ageless Grace Brain Health Program, which is in 50 US states and 30 other countries. And our purpose is to change the model of aging in the world. The purpose of this show is to help us all decide how we can live a more graceful life. That can mean a lot of things. It can be inviting in or making more space for grace that's bestowed upon us, and we don't have to do anything to earn it. It just happens. It can be opening up to the ability to receive grace from our friends and loved ones, or perhaps even from a stranger. And it is also something that we can be in charge of. We can be in charge of creating a more graceful life by the choices that we make in the way that we live, the way that we choose to live a happy life, the way that we choose to have discussions that are sometimes not always easy, but pave the way to a more graceful way of being. And that leads me right into the introduction of my guest tonight, Yvonne Heath. And we're so happy to have you, Yvonne.
Thank you so much, my friend. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for coming. And I want to tell you just a little bit about Yvonne before we get started. And of course, there's lots to tell. I could talk the whole show about all of her experiences and qualifications and information, but instead I'm going to short bio, and then some more things will come through as she's talking to you. She's been a registered nurse since 1988, and she's worked in the United States and Canada in many areas, including emergency, chemotherapy, and hospice. And she became disheartened by our society's reluctance to talk about, to plan, to prepare for grief. And it causes a lot of excessive suffering when it's not thought or planned for or discussed with our loved ones. And she suffered too because she didn't know how to do it differently. But in 2015, she blazed a new trail to create social change. She shares her messages and her heart and her humor as an author, a speaker in her online program, and as a television host on the winwinwomen.com network. And in 2019, she delivered a TEDx talk by going to YouTube and putting in the name Yvonne. And she's also passionate about something that's called the I Just Showed Up movement. And when she is not speaking or talking or on her TV show, you can find her often sock feet at the same time at home in Canada with her husband and her twins and various pets. So we really welcome, and we're so happy to have her on the show. And I'm going to turn this over to her and be able to talk about, my computer is making all kinds of funny noises. I don't know why, just because this is one of those days when funny noises happen, I guess. And we get to go with the flow. So there is a chat, and I says there's acting up going on, so you might see that Yvonne and I are talking back and forth in the chat because we're figuring out how to make whatever's going on to be as easy as it is possible. So I'd like to start off first by asking Yvonne a question and saying this. Why would you leave a professional nursing career and suddenly go off and become a speaker and an author and a TV show host?
That is a very good question. And I wish I had an answer that at the time it absolutely terrified me. I didn't really have a choice, Denise, because I was part of a system. I was part of a system where grief, death, dying fell through the cracks. I was a part of that system. I didn't know how to do it differently. And it was like the universe kept pushing me and putting me in these situations where I witnessed people suffering. I witnessed people wanting to have real conversations with their families, but they would say, you know, my family wants me to keep up the good fight. They don't want me to give up. And I would leave so incredibly heavy and disheartened. And I just couldn't be a part of the pretending anymore. I just couldn't do it. It was like there was like one more thing happened where I just said, I need to do something differently. And I had no idea what that was.
Mm. Well, I think you found something wonderfully different to do, because talking about the name of this show will give you a clue about how important some of the conversations she is having with many of us at every opportunity. The name of the show is Living, Grieving, and Dying Well. And of course, living is an easy topic to talk about, but grieving and dying, not so much. However, living process includes the grieving many times often, and the dying process, whether it's the death of someone near and dear to us, or whether it's planning and preparing for our own change from this body to another form of being. And so I would love for you to tell us a little bit about why you chose this topic and how you talk to people about this. I know you had the hospice experience, but it's not an easy thing to open up to someone and get them to open up to you. Or for me, I don't think it would be.
Right. And, you know, you're 100% right. And when you think about the things that, you know, if you want to get good at something or better at something, what do we need to do? Right? So we want to play what's easy to talk about. I don't know, volleyball. My son plays volleyball. He practices. He's read about volleyball. He has a coach. He is out there continuously. He is improving. He makes mistakes. Then he corrects, and then he goes back in there, you know, brushes himself off, gets back in there. When it comes to the most challenging part of this journey we call life, I think everyone would agree that that is navigating grief and facing the death of loved ones or a diagnosis or, you know, our own dying. We completely avoid it until we have no choice. And then we're like a turtle on our back trying to figure out how to navigate through and wondering why we are so uncomfortable, wondering why we don't have coping skills or strategies, or why we're so uncomfortable. First of all, I say, well, yeah, it's uncomfortable and it's sad. You know, we love our people. We want to live a very full, wonderful life. And we have this misconception. I talk about the elephant in the room. See, he's back there. A misconception that means we have to live until we're 105 to have a full life, right? And the truth is that isn't the reality of this journey. So once again, by avoiding, and you know, someone that's younger dies, it's just a tragedy and we push it aside, and then we wonder why we suffer. I'm doing this because I want to do it differently.
Yeah.
I want to do it. It isn't easy for me either, right? So I'm just grabbing the bull by the horns and saying, okay, grief, bring it on. Let's talk about this.
Awesome.
Because what's the alternative? Right?
Right. I love when Yvonne and I talked about this a while ago, I said, oh my gosh, this is such an important subject, because some of you who might know me, for example, know that over the last 18 months, and during COVID, when things were not exactly happy and hearted, I lost 5 of the people who were dearest to me in my life, people that I saw, people that I talked to on the phone every day or every couple of days. And I was I happen to have a belief system that really supports me very, very well. And I personally don't believe that the S of us dies or goes away. That's my personal belief, and that's a very comfortable belief. And I know everyone does not have it. And so even talking about that, like, what do you believe, is an important thing, I know. And understanding, well, what do I believe really happens? And then wouldn't you say, Jan, that people need to get comfortable or at least figure out what it is they believe about a death process, whether it's someone else's or their own?
Oh my goodness.
Become
It is.
comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, like, yeah, we'll say comfortable, right? Because
Right.
I just say, people say to me, oh, this is so uncomfortable. So yeah, absolutely. It totally is. Don't wait for it to be comfortable, because it just isn't. My whole focus, my whole passion and purpose is that we become proactive. We become proactive because when you think about it, we have this life, whether we love our life, there's glitches in life, let's be honest. But what we don't do, there's like this gap before. We have no coping skills, no strategies. And my goal is for all of us throughout life, including children, is that we normalize these conversations and we build a foundation before grief arrives. And that very bottom foundation, I have 7 takeaways that I share. And takeaway number 1, the best time to talk about, plan, and prepare for grief, death, and dying is when we are young and healthy. And I look, some of us have missed that. Well, the next best time is now. Now. And part of that is key. What do you believe about life and death? Choose to believe something that will create a soft landing for you in life and at the end of life. And when we get caught up in the why, oh, why did this have to happen to them? Why did Denise have to experience 5 people she loved dying? Why did this person have to die young? If we get mired in that, we will suffer for the rest of our lives, because what answer would ever be good enough? Right? Like, think about what answer would be good enough. So that belief that can make sense. It doesn't negate grief. You will grieve. Yes, absolutely. We'll grieve the physical presence. But like for me, I believe we are physical beings or spiritual beings having a human experience. It's kind of a pit stop. I don't know what's next. And so I don't live with this false, holding on to, oh my gosh, I hope everybody that I love lives a really long life. I just accept that we're all here as long as we're here. We don't have to like it, but we're all here as long as we're here. And, then we move on. And it's funny because when people, like I say, everyone says, who doesn't want to face death? Everyone puts, who doesn't want to die? Put up their hand. Say, well, who wants to live forever? It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, how long have you been with your husband? Like 299 years. I mean, really, aren't we going to run out of something to talk about? So there's a very big difference between a full life and a long life, right? So let's create that foundation and that belief and normalize these conversations throughout life.
Well, what you just said about a full life versus a long life is a critical thing to understanding grief. For example, I happen to know that those 5 people that I love so much lived life to the fullest. I mean, even the last months of their lives, for those who actually knew they would be leaving, was full of, oh, I've got this other thing on my bucket list, and oh, I'm going to do this thing, and oh, let me talk to you about this story, about this great thing I did, when I was a kid. And sharing that full life with others, especially me, really helped me. It helped them be able to face the transition and realize, oh gosh, I have really had a full life. And it helped me to be able to say goodbye to them better, because I felt like, wow, they really know what joy is. They know what living a happy life means. And so that gave me great comfort. Like you say, who knows what's next? But when you are one of those people who believe that there is something next, like my sister-in-law, who I always stumble over the word sister-in-law because we were like sisters, and we always said we were sisters since we were 22 and 23 when we met. So it's been a little while, because this birthday I just celebrated was my 70th. So it's been, we knew each other. And we always said we were sisters, and she always said, this is my transformation. She said, I can't wait to see how I transform.
I love it. Well, and and Denise, you spoke about choice. And here's the thing, right? And when I speak to people, I say, we always have a choice. And people say, we don't always have a choice. I wouldn't choose this. And I say, well, hold on now. We don't always have the choice we wish we had, right? We would not choose a tragedy. We would not choose a diagnosis, a loved one dying, whatever it may be. However, what we do moving forward, what we do with this situation, how we honor this person that we love so much. There's so many choices that we can make. We don't have to love the situation. My goodness, there's many situations that I haven't loved in my life. However, I also know that grief and joy can coexist, right? Everybody write that down. Grief and joy can coexist. So like Denise, for example, in those, I mean, my goodness, 5 people, I mean, that's too much. Sometimes grief is, there's just too much. And yet you found ways, and because we've chatted about this, you supported these beautiful people, you honored their lives, you continue to honor them by sharing stories about how awesome they were, how much you love them. You are being the evidence that their lives made a difference. Their memories, that love, it continues on, and we get to cherish that forever. And so wouldn't it be wonderful to choose to continue to love them and honor them and live the heck of it out of our lives, because that's what we would have wanted them to do, right? I always tell people, we all know, I've been at the bedside of more dying people than I can count. I said, when I started on this journey, I thought, I wonder if have I had enough experience? And I started writing down names, and I stopped at 100. And I thought, that's, I feel like I have something to say here. And of course, I continue to connect with beautiful people who have been in the deepest trenches of grief, like just the most agonizing loss, grief you could possibly imagine. And they chose to create a life they love again, because they grieve the person who died, and they're joyful that they were in their lives, and they accept that grief is now a part of their journey, and that it's more than okay to bring in the joy. We don't have to be cloaked in darkness 24/7 because someone we love died, because then we just become another person to grieve, right? When we stop living. So it's in these conversations, right? We haven't normalized these conversations. Well, I have for the last 7 years, since 2015, but it's unbelievable. Like, I couldn't even believe how many people had never even spoken the D word, death, in their home. They were so terrified. And I thought, my goodness, it's a hard way to live, right? That's a hard way to live.
It is a hard way to live. And I admire the way my father died. And I think we talked about this, but just briefly for those who are listening, is my dad had pancreatic cancer. It's very swift, and especially then, this was in 1992. They said, you probably have 2 months. And so my dad, they said, now we could do chemo, we could do radiation, blah, blah, blah. And my dad said, now tell me clearly, if I did those things, what would my quality of life be, and how much longer would I live? And I thought, wow, he asked. That's pretty brave. And the doctor said, well, your quality of life would not be great. You'd probably be sick most of the time, and it might only add another 2 or 3 months to your life.
Right.
And my dad said, thank you. I am going to go home and I'm going to live these last 2 months to the fullest. And my dad was an artist, and none of that really matters. But what he did was he took all the things that he loved in his life, and he specifically invited people into our home, his home at the time, and said, you know, I would like to give you this. I'd like to gift you this. I'd like to pass this on to you. And he thoughtfully and carefully chose, like, who would he give his paints to? Who would he give his accordion to that he played? Who would he give his weights that he lifted and used at our church to teach young boys how to lift weights and have something constructive and positive for their own self-image to do instead of, you know, getting into trouble. And he did that once a week. So he got those boys together that he'd been working with for several years, and he gave them all those weights, and he gave them a charge. He's, you have to find a place, you know, for these weights in somebody's basement, and you have to please carry on what we've been doing. And so not only did they do it, I know this for a fact for years later, but a couple of those boys became, you know, men, and they started doing the same thing for other young men in the church with those weights that my dad did. So I felt like that was a beautiful way to sort of tie up his life like a package and put a bow on it at the end, that he got to have the things he cared about and the people that he cared about, a private conversation. He gave them something that was his, and everybody enjoyed it and loved it. And my dad died very peacefully and quietly.
Oh my goodness. There's so much. I love your dad now, you know, now he's in, see, now he is in my heart because he chose, right? And he chose, he made his decisions. And here's the thing, and here's the other thing. And I was a nurse, remember, over 27 years.
Yeah.
There is always another treatment that we can give. The question we need to ask more often is, should we? And I want to empower everyone, your beautiful father, to ask the question, am I going to be creating a sick life until the end of my life if I do these treatments? Or I love some people say, well, you have to have the chemo. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. So he chose, whether it's a shorter life, a fuller life. And he gave so many gifts. The people whose lives he touched went on to continue his legacy, to help others. I mean, what a beautiful way to honor your father. And he created a good death. And that is extraordinary. You know, we people just see death as the worst thing that could possibly happen. And to me, that is not true. Suffering is so much worse than death. And I've witnessed it over and over and over. So I'll thank you for sharing that, because it's just showing how we can do it differently.
Absolutely. And one of the 5 of my loved ones who passed valiantly fought for 5 years and had a good quality of life. And that's what she said, I'm going to do the chemo as long as I feel better and live longer. And then she did a different kind of chemo, and that didn't work anymore. And when she got to the one that no longer worked and really destroyed the quality of her life, she said, okay, I've done my best. And she continued to live really fully as well. The one that's my sister, sister-in-law, who said, this is my transformation. I can't wait to see how it's going to be. And of course, we can say a faith, a belief is really a powerful foundation to have when you're going through something like this, whether you're the person who is actually the one who's leaving, or whether you're helping someone else leave. And that's another thing. You use that term to me in a conversation about helping your loved one through this time. And I thought, how powerful is that, to really think that you can be of help? And I think maybe one of the most powerful things you can do is talk to them about it and listen to what they have to say.
Oh my goodness, you are so right. And it's funny because people say, well, oh my gosh, it's so uncomfortable. How do I start this conversation? And I say, well, I usually just walk in and start to cry. Right? I say, I want to talk about this and I'm so sad. And, I always just say, we want these wonderful answers, right? And these wonderful things to say. And I just say, you know what? Just lead with your heart. And we talked about just show up, just lead with your heart and tell them, I am so nervous right now and I'm scared and I want to say the right things and there's nothing to say. And, it's all okay, because when you care and when you just show up and you are willing to sit in and allow the grief, the sadness, and the humor and all of it, that is the greatest gift that you can give someone. And I'll share quickly Kevin, because Kevin was receiving chemotherapy. We spent a lot of time together and he was in his 40s. I was older than he was, it's even harder, right? And he just walked in all the time and he was just this ball of energy and he knew all the other patients and he shook hands and he smiled and he chatted, and he was terminal. The chemo was no longer working. And the last time he came to the hospital, ironically, my husband's paramedic and he brought him in and he said, I brought Kevin in. So I went to see him to comfort Kevin. That's what I'm going to do. And I walked in and I just started to look at him. I started to cry, black mascara all running down, face like a blowfish. I'm like, oh, and I don't even know what I was saying. And he's like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay. And I said, okay, great. Now you're comforting me and you're dying. That's even worse. And we just started laughing. We started laughing. I was laughing and crying and hugging. I was a mess. Let's allow our humanness, our hot, messy selves, and be okay with saying, this is challenging. This is hard. I'm not sure what to do. We don't talk about this stuff. Just start. Right? This conversation could go on and on and on. And I just like our guests to know that Yvonne and I realize this is not a short show. This is a show that has lots of parts to it. So she will be back as my guest in June, and she will be back in July, and she's coming back 3 different episodes so that we can all have more conversations about this and more advice. She's already given us 2 or 3 of her tips. Do you have one that you would like to leave us with tonight until we get to our next show? And you will all hear about it. I will be promoting it and marketing it. And so will Yvonne when she is on next month. Absolutely. And I'll just repeat and I'll make it a 2-parter. Just remember that grief and joy can coexist. And when you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, and you can't fix it, the magic answer is just show up.
Beautiful.
Just show up.
Thank you so much. So I would love to have you tell everyone how to find you on a website. She is a coach. She also works with families and individuals who are in grief or who are in the dying process, or someone they love is. And would you just tell them, Yvonne, how to find you?
Very simply, if you just go to my website, loveyourlifetodeath.com. There's all kinds of resources there, and you can send us a message there. I'm always happy to chat with anyone.
Thank you so much. And I also would just like to tell you all that Ageless Grace, as you know, is a brain health program. And it is something make you laugh. It can lift your spirits. It can help you move your body and sometimes process grief and take things through it. And it can be as simple as shaking a part of your body or another part or all of your body to a song. It can be as simple as pretending you're playing musical instruments to a song. It can be as simple as pretending you're playing a sport to a song. But that movement is very important. It's easy when we're a little depressed or discouraged or down or sad to say, oh, I don't feel like moving today. I just want to lay on the couch and not move. So I encourage anyone who's in the grief process or who has some sadness and sorrow in their lives and who doesn't have that you move, like cause yourself, invite yourself to have more grace by moving, whatever that is. And the funnier and sillier and more playful it is, the more it's going to move through your body and help you feel better about life itself. So thank everyone for being on the show tonight and tuning in to Living a Graceful Life, and especially this episode on living, grieving, and dying with Yvonne Heath. We will have more. And so I always like to leave people with one thought. And the thought tonight is this: what if each one of us actually got over our fear, our discomfort, and we had a conversation that was hard with someone who might be going through grief or through a personal dying process, and we actually showed up for that person, even if all we knew to do was hold their hand? I think we would change the world. So I'm going to stop the recording now and invite everyone to talk or chat or share with Yvonne. Thanks for being here.